Hi, everybody. I'm Scott, and thanks again for joining me today for another episode of the Companion Podcast in support of the film Skin on Skin: The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2. Got a great deep dive for you today, friends. A deep dive. And something we've not done before, where I went on to a live call with four others talking about somebody that all of us worked with and for back in the day, and that was Evans Senior Vice President Fred Handel. So I'm not going to belabor things too much here. And before I take you inside, just prepare yourself for an interesting conversation, very free form. I asked a couple of basic questions, but otherwise just sat back and let it go where it may. And it was fascinating. And again, it's nice to get a deep dive and get out of the heads of others than just the Meltzer family, my family, because there were all these other people and all these other families involved. In fact, everybody on this call has other family that worked for the Evans Fur Company. So let me take you inside, and it's myself and producer Larry Becker, who you're all very familiar with by now, former Evans Fur buyer Jim Leitz, Brian Witt, who was a regional manager in the company and followed me in a lot of paths. We seem to be on paths together the same way I followed Larry, and Fred Handel's daughter, Michelle Handel Parkhurst, who also to this day is still at Evans in Scottsdale. So here we go. Sit back, enjoy. Like I said, very free form. And, it's just lovely reminiscing about somebody who everybody had tremendous affinity for back in the day at the Evans Fur Company. So you were doing what? You were in merchandising when you first met Freddie, and what was his position?
He was in charge of mink coats, and then I worked a lot with Stewart in the contemporaries, and then I remember Freddie. We used to have to look at all the spreadsheets from all the regionals, and by the time we got done, he says, "Oh, we're gonna go broke right away." He was the banker of the company at that, in the fur end. He was a banker. He said, "We can't spend this kind of money. We go to Canada with 30 people, and by the time you get done, we do it in spreadsheets and nights." It says, "We got to, what? You can't buy all this stuff. We don't have enough money." So, it was a good thing you had a guy like Freddie, because he was controlling the purse strings of what everybody was spending, whether it was, in for Chicago or the lease departments. Otherwise, you would be going crazy, spending money you don't have. He controlled all the money.
And that it was crazy. That was crazy with those 30 people, because we treated it like 30 separate businesses doing buys. And so then the whole thing, Freddie's job was to cut it back down to normal, like we're one company.
Well, we'd go up to Marvin Yarrow's company, Christian Dior. We'd spend a whole day there, and then you go to dinner, and then you go and work on the spreadsheets, and you work for 3 or 4 hours at night. Then Freddie would wake up in the morning and said, "Guys, we can't buy all this stuff. You guys got to cut all this back." There wasn't really any control. I think in other parts of the company, they just said, "This is what I want for my division." And then at the end of the year, you bring everything down to the basement, and everybody said, "Well, I don't want that. I don't want that. I didn't buy that." And then you check it. "Oh yeah, you did." It was always fights. At the end of the year, when you got everything back from the stores in the base, in the basement with Peaches and those guys. So it was interesting. Freddie taught us a lot about money. You can't just go spending. You got to have it first, and you can't just decide you want something because you think that you're going to sell it.
All right, Larry, how about you? Where were you? What was your life going on in the company when you first came into Freddie's orbit and your first couple of interactions with him?
I was very much like Jimmy. In fact, we were there together. and Jimmy was shadowing Stuart, and I was shadowing Freddie. And I mean, everything that Jimmy just said is without a question of a doubt, that's all 100% true. But you know what I found from Freddie? Freddie was, to me, he was a warm person. He was a caring person. When it came to the business, he was he taught me things that I never knew in my life, like to be conservative, as Jimmy says. Like, he would let you go out and express yourself and then bring you in like a tuna. You know what I mean? And but what he would do, he would explain to you why, and how to be successful. And I think that came from his own competence. And he one thing about Freddie, he was not afraid to teach us, certainly me. He wasn't afraid to teach me the job. Whereas Stuart, Jimmy, right, when we would work with Stuart would go home at the end of the day and lock up his drawers. So, like, if you asked him a question about the reports, he would say, "You don't need to know this stuff."
Yeah. Why do you need that?
Yeah,
That's my
exactly.
job.
Exactly. So, I
What if
mean,
you die? What happens?
well, again, you know what? Freddie knew also, and look at Freddie's path. Freddie went and ended up controlling the company, the fur end of the company. And again, the only way he knew that the only way for him to move up would be to have somebody take his position, as opposed to the theory that, if I let this guy, know what's going on, he's going to take my job. Again, a lot of Freddie, what he taught me was confidence, and because he did his job, everything was tried and true. When it came to budgeting, it was like he had the answer. At the end of the day, he had the answer. And it was built around conservatism. Could
Oh,
always
very
get,
conservative.
yes, you can get more merchandise. You know what I mean? Let's sell these first. But also, Freddie was an empathetic person.
Let me ask you a question. So, where do you think that all came from? That came from Walter and Sam and all those guys, yeah?
Well, I mean, I was just about to say, Freddie was also a very empathetic person. He was compassionate, he was considerate, and he had all of those qualities. I think that came from Freddie. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? I
I will
can't.
tell you, I will tell you that it's not just with the business that he was conservative. He always taught us as kids. First of all, he always lived beneath his means. We always did.
Yeah,
And so when things got bad for some other people, when the things crashed at Evans, things were not a problem for us because he never lived. I mean, we lived in a small house in Arlington Heights. We never had a huge house. He
He never
never
kept up with
lived.
the Joneses because they died.
Never. And his big motto was kids, he told us, it doesn't matter how much money you make, it's how much you save. And so it wasn't just, it was something that didn't necessarily come from his work life. I think it had something to do with the way he was raised.
no doubt.
And because he lived his life that way too. So
He
that
taught me to live my
translated,
life that way.
yeah, he translated whatever that was in the way he was raised to his work life. I mean, we had one little store. When we bought the store here in Phoenix, we had one little store. We still had an open to buy. We didn't just go in and buy whatever. Every single month was planned out. The sales were planned out. The advertising was planned out month to month. He left a 20% cushion for special orders. He left a cushion in case we didn't meet our sales. So what you guys are all saying you did on a big scale, when we bought the company, he taught me, bought the store here, it was the same way. We'd go to market, we'd shop, we'd write orders every single place we were, we'd take them back to our room at night and start slashing them because we never left orders when we first were with manufacturers. We took them back to the room and we sat there at night and we looked at our open to buy and what we needed and started slashing the orders, and then went back, at the end of wherever we were, the fair or our trip, and then we turned in our orders. But, you know, a lot of people don't do that. The guy I work for now, what's an open to buy? Well, you know, when I first started working for this guy, I'm like, what do? You just go to market and buy whatever? Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So,
Or they do what I complain about all the time, which is, let it be ruled by numbers or reports or whatnot with no touch to it. Okay, Brian, how about you? Tell us when you first came into Freddie's orbit and what you were doing and what he was doing and early lessons as a youngster.
Early lesson, I was shadowing Harry Robinson, and that was before he went out to work for Riccio. And I went with Harry into a meeting with Freddie, and it was the first time I really met him on a one-to-one basis. And we were sitting there and we were going over reports, and I know you hate reports, but Freddie was looking at the whole company, and you have to use the reports. And he and Harry were going back and forth, and I just started kind of laughing. And Freddie's like, "What do you think is so funny?" And I'm like, "Well, you're looking and you're talking about why things aren't being met, why sales aren't being met." And I'm like, "It's very evident." I'm like, "Look at Riccio. He has 3 times the amount of stock that he was supposed to have. Look at Kozlo's, the 2 stores don't even have 40% of the stock they're supposed to have in Class 08 mink. They don't have the coats to show, they don't have the coats to sell. Riccio's got them all." I said, "You need to pay a little more attention and balance it out." And Freddie's looking, going, "Are you sure about those numbers?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it could be a few percentage points off, but let's take a look." And after that, he just, I would say, trusted me on that. And about every 2 weeks, he would call me into the office and we'd sit down and we would talk about anything and everything in the company. Not really brainstorming, but he just wanted my take as to what was happening in the merchandising end and on the store end and what kind of problems were coming up. And it wasn't like a tattletale, but it was just to give him a little more down on the earth feeling of it, because it's exactly what everybody has said. He was very conservative. He was very numbers orientated on the spending. But in the time I got to know him, we were trying to put much more, so much thought was put into open to buys, what stock levels were. But when somebody was sitting with 50% more stock than they were supposed to, and they're not making their sales, you got to pull that stuff. Somebody has to be an a-hole and say, "You know what, Ricky, I don't care. You need to give up 40 coats. And these are the 40 coats I need. Don't send me the 40 pieces of shit that you were thinking about doing." And, after we had a few of those discussions, he and I, we got along really well, a little bit different than a lot of people. It was a lot more casual than I would have expected. And like you said, he would teach you things, he would explain things. It was great. But on the other side, he expected more and more from me. And that's why I ended up replacing Harry, because he just had a confidence with it.
Well, that is the thing that Freddie would do. And look at how many of us left there, left Evans, either started our own business or went to other businesses and, just kept going up the ladder with the knowledge that we left with. And he was the only one that put that knowledge in our pocket and brains.
Well, in 91, when I came back to Chicago and I had an opportunity to sit down and talk with Freddie a couple of times. And this happened even before I left, but he wanted it because I was gone for like 4 years. And in that expanse, a lot of things changed in the company from 86 to 91.
Yeah, the bank account.
Well, and I know you were aware of this because it was right before you went to the Orient. And I know Jimmy was there, where Robert K was talking about doing Tintori workout equipment, things like that, building catalogs and other areas in that. And Freddie and I, we would sit down, and it wasn't really brainstorming, but he would ask, "How crazy do you think Robert K is?" And no, he meant that in a good way. And I'm like, "I don't think he's crazy at all. He sees there's an issue with furs." And we talked about this on the previous ones, where the company needs to expand. where can we expand? Where is our expertise? And how can we make sure to ensure the continuation of Evans? And when, Robert had a lot, I'm not going to say harebrained ideas, but he was trying a lot of different things. And, and I'm not sure who was responsible for it, but going into wholesale with QVC and American Express, whoever that was a genius, because we made a shit ton of money, and Katie and Murphy did a great job running it. So it was profitable as can be.
Well, Robert had a fresh eye, and Robert did steer us into new things. You're certainly right about that.
Yeah, I remember going up to the 19th floor, packing those goddamn Blue Fox jackets for 3 days up there with Robert up there packing and shipping all those 2.5 skin jackets. God.
That was for American Express, right?
Yeah. We were all up there that day, even including Robert, packing and shipping.
I had to inspect those things. That fur came from the ground, and they would just glue it onto leather.
Well, I know. And then we had to put them in the drums, and that half came out. Oh God.
I would say, God, this coffee tastes different. And Peter would say it was cinnamon. It was some sort of drug.
It was a very short time he worked for them because they could never find him.
Le Grand Hotel, 45 La Croisette, Caen, France.
We're here to build a business with you and to make you money.
Today, friends, we're doing another one of our deeper dives.
My father was, he could be a total asshole to people.
Oh, we got to find this. You guys got to do it right now. I forgot about this. And he's running around like a chicken with his head cut off.
Go in for higher price lines, attract new and better customers, and be unafraid.
I spent 43 years in the industry because I made a lot of friends.
I didn't know that, right? 22, 23 years old. I'm like, no, I'm not taking it back.
These stories today certainly are influenced and totally affected by the Evans Fur Company.
I was after inventory, and there's like $250,000 worth of merchandise missing.
I'm actually weaving a tapestry, kind of like orchestrally, in with my guitars. They're all building and changing.
So he was an assistant, and he put the keys on the table, and he walked out and said, I'm out of here. I'm not coming back.
Skill set is really going down. Like let-out garments are almost impossible to make in Greece.
I was giving them an opportunity to buy from me.
Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 3. Okay, so let's how about stories? Who's got some stories they can tell about Freddie? Larry, how about you? Larry?
The stories, we traveled the world together. You know what I mean? It was like like I say, he took me on a ride. It was like,
So how was he when you got him out of Chicago?
How was he when he was still
traveling? Was he different? Was it the same? Was he the same Freddie? Was it the same work circumstance? Was there
Well, we weren't there on vacation. I mean,
Right, of course.
we were there to work. So Freddie Handel work, which I would say 9 to 5, but that was never the case. Freddie Handel at work was always Freddie Handel at work. Freddie Handel after work was Freddie Handel after work. You know what I mean? He was a great guy. Going to dinner with him was like, first of all, he always made me order the most expensive things on the menu.
Always.
Always. That was his
Why?
thing. I
Why
would say,
is why? I wanted to ask you when you told that story last year. Why?
why?
What was the point?
I think it was two things. The first time he ever told me that, actually, I was in the Standard Club with Freddie and Sam Garber and David and Robert. Or maybe it was just Robert. I tell you what, it was one of the most exciting days of my life, and I can't remember now. Well, look, a squirrel. What I'm saying is that we were going in there, and I was to be not really negotiating, but hearing what they had in store for me, in as much as remuneration was for Hong Kong. So we literally, we're walking, to the Standard Club, and Freddie pulls me back and he says, "You order the most expensive thing on the menu." And I'm like, okay. And I thought he was kidding, really. And then I remember looking at the menu, and it was like, oh God, they had veal chop. I said, I wanted that. It wasn't the most expensive thing. I think he kicked me under the table. And I said, okay, I'll have the Chilean sea bass. I don't even eat fish. And now all of a sudden I'm like, because I did whatever he said, because I knew, you knew that my father worked there. He was my second father. So I knew that he would always steer me right. I think the theory there was, we were talking about money. And I think that he wanted David and Robert and Sam Garber to know that I got some class and I wasn't going to order that cheap veal. You know what I mean? But he also, Freddie was my consultant while I was at Evans and after I left Evans. He definitely, I spoke to him more about my business than I did about Evans. And we spent every day together for, I don't know how many years. But I remember being Scott, you had talked about with Bob McGrath and sharing information in a bathroom. And you were talking about him. And then all of a sudden the toilet flushes and Bob
And out he
McGrath
came.
comes out. Okay. Well, I can remember that same day we went into, I went into the bathroom and Freddie followed me in. And the first thing he did was look underneath the stalls, just give he was looking for feet just to make sure. And then he had information to share that actually got me to Hong Kong. You know what I mean? They got me there comfortably, but the fact of the matter is, yeah, he was the true epitome of being a mentor to me.
Well, I will tell you even with our one little store here, before we would go to New York, he'd always say, okay, so we have to line up our sponsors and make sure they're taking us to the best places in New York. Okay.
Oh, I got yelled out when I filled out an expense report without giving it to him, because I put down for a couple of the days, I put down nothing for dinner, because that night Benny Stroll took us for dinner, and the next night the other one took us for dinner, and Freddie was like, "No, you can't do that." And he made sure that we were compensated in every possible way. Every possible way.
Well, that goes back to what Michelle was talking about with the scholarship fund and everything. Jimmy, what about you? You got a story to share?
Yeah, when we used to go to New York, we could go to dinner with 15 different people. We went to Canada. Everybody was chasing us to take us to dinner. We went to when we would go HSG or EFL. We want to take you guys to dinner. And they would take us to dinner. During the fair, we go to that Greek restaurant.
Milos or
Yeah,
Molibos.
well, we went to the one across the street with the pink Cadillac in front of it, and that's when I wanted to kill you.
That was the strip club, Jimmy.
No, 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 no. When you offered the guy a job in Chicago, you were gone. He kept on calling me. when am I going to get my job?
Oh, Tom Reddy from Canadian Hat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And we used to have meals planned. We would go to Milos on the fur, with Ellen Seifert, with the Fur Information Council. They'd have that big thing up there. We go to Milos and eat those lamb chops that were bigger than a porterhouse steak. And then we never had to worry. Sometimes we had to tell people, no, we can't go to dinner with you. We're not doing it. We're not doing any business with you. Well, I want to do business with you. But it's we went to one time with Teddy from Grecophilia. We went to a restaurant, there was no prices on the menu. Only he had prices.
Yeah.
So you didn't know if you could order the most expensive thing.
Well, I mean, Jimmy, think about that. You were his date, and I think it was the third date. I think he was planning to fuck you afterwards.
Yeah. Yes. I remember they sent me once to Hong Kong by myself when Stewart was running the office.
I was going to say, was that just a one-way ticket or?
No. And then I went to Stewart's house for dinner. It was very good.
Yeah.
It was, they sent me there myself. And I remember the one time we went to Hong Kong, I stayed in a hotel. You couldn't even change your mind in the room. And they were staying in the Peninsula across the street. Yeah. They came to my room and they said, how can you sleep in here? I don't know. It must be a Chinese room. But it was all right. You learned a lot though, when we went to those places with these like old men.
Well, I mean, not for nothing. Think of the privilege that we had, again, shadowing these guys across the world. And learning and really and truly, we were kids. I mean, I was in Paris, in Milan, in Hong Kong, in Korea. I was 28 years old. By the time I was 30, I was living in Hong Kong. You know what I mean? And it was all first class. It really and truly was first class. That's what we were exposed to.
Yeah, I remember we went to Korea the one time, and we were eating hamburgers, and Sharon Bass was eating cheese. I don't know what. Well, that could be dog. I said, but you know what? If they're eating it, so can we. Who knew? You don't know what you're eating.
Well, do you remember though? Before they would sit down, they would circle around the chair. It was dog. Don't you remember?
That's disgusting.
Were you, Jimmy? Were you in Korea with the Cherry Blossom Festival with Mr. O, and we were at the barbecue outside, and I thought you were there. I know Freddie was there. When I got up to go to the bathroom, they came out. It was barbecue, and they were serving us like, this is good about Freddie, because nobody ever saw Freddie Handel drink. Okay, I mean, Freddie he wasn't a big fan of alcohol. Okay, because he was always a very serious guy. There were guys, Stuart Caney, the old
he was
Bob,
a drinker. He was a drinker.
Oh God, old Bob Meltzer, old man Bob. I mean, these people were drunk all the time.
Yeah,
and Freddie now. But like, we would be in Korea and we would be the host of some banquet dinner, and we'd be it was shots of gasoline, whether it was Korea or China. And I remember being with Freddie one time. My father was there, Freddie was there, I was there. I think Tommy was there. Tommy may have been the director of the office at that time. And we got so drunk with this vendor, and like I felt like I was the one that was helping my dad and Freddie that night. But
Part of
tell you
that,
what,
I mean, is out of respect for their culture.
oh,
right?
100%.
Yeah, I mean,
100. That's
sometimes
why.
you had to do things because it would be culturally offensive not to.
I
So,
think my point was that I was able to do it without the hangover because I
yeah,
was well
right,
I was well trained at that.
right.
So that's
And
why
they
we wore
weren't.
suits all the time, because then sometimes you could take the food out and put it in your pocket.
And even Yves Saint Laurent was all shearling for a couple of years. Now they're showing mink again. So there must be something going on.
The only thing that I could offer Gibson was to send it off to Chicago and let them make the decision.
The real fur looks so much different on film than the fake shit, but you're starting to see them go back to it.
Refused to say he was a feathered pillow. Yes, that is a common.
Goes back to how focused he was. He knew what he wanted, and he usually got it.
I need this. I need this. I got an ad coming up. What do you think? I'm a magician?
And I want you to take a lie detector. I go, I'll meet with you at the mall where all the people are.
That was my first shot at running a business. It was great. I made, like everyone else, you make mistakes. You see the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I send you this note, which I believe is timely, the result of 53 years of experience in the retail business.
People were diversifying like crazy. Jeff was begging David to diversify. He used to always come to him with business ideas.
We should diversify into completely different industries.
He said, well, will you stay on as a consultant? And my dad said, sure, I'd consider that.
At the same, the Nelsons really didn't run it anymore. They really didn't know the fur business.
We're covering a lot of sentimentality in years, because this movie, I'll say the hardest thing about this movie, which I dig, is the depth.
Truly, I've been through hell for the last 5 years. My heart broken when I had to give up my lovely home in New Rochelle.
We used to laugh at remodels back in the 80s. We didn't have time for remodels. Now that's what we do. What I have done is I've got the trappers involved, and they're very helpful because you need an army of people.
I had to set up a meeting with the lenders, and it brought Bill Koziel, David, Ernie Wish, and myself. And I put on an act.
That was a destiny they created.
And then the vendor would say, could I see you and David and Robert in the back, please?
All right, Brian, how about you? You got a Freddie story?
A couple of them. When everybody's talking about food, when I was in Chicago, I would always eat different things. And it was one time right after Thanksgiving, I had it was a orphan Thanksgiving. So all the trainees who didn't go home in that, we had them over, and I had made a chestnut liver stuffing for the turkey. So I had come in, it was the Saturday after, and Freddie came in, And I wasn't expecting him, and he called me in his office, and I'm like, well, I'm eating breakfast. It's like 8 o'clock. He was in early. And he goes, well, just bring it in with you. Well, his stomach is not necessarily at that point wasn't. So I come in and this stuff is just reeking of. He took one smell and threw me out of his office.
Isn't that when you were moved to the lease department?
No, but close. The other time was when Freddie, we got into a discussion, and he didn't like to be told that he made a mistake. And
that's true. That I'll attest to.
And, I was sitting there, and if you remember the 55 sleeve, otherwise known as the rope-a-dope by Freddie, on the tourmaline mink coat and the cerulean, it was with a matching fur. And
you guys are all amazing, remembering style. I forgot all this crap long ago. Like, I'm not like you guys on this call, all the others I interview. Like, you're all amazing. Just go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
We were brainwashed.
Well, what happened was, and I had I hate to tell you, Scott, but I had the reports in front of me, and we had like a 98% sell-through inside of 60 days. And I'm like, you didn't reorder these. We discussed it 30 days ago, and we didn't place an order. We didn't reorder them. We really missed the boat. So he let that go. And 2 years later, we were working, and I don't know if you remember the 66 sleeve, which was like the jagged edge shark tooth. It was like black fox with silver fox or crystal fox sleeve on a ranch mink coat. So we had originally placed the order for 200 coats, and we were redoing the numbers. I was sitting in Freddie's office, and he asked me what I thought of it, because it was after I'd returned from New York, and I'm like, well, you're ordering 200. I think you're about 400 short. And he's like, there's no way we can spend that much money on these coats. And at the time, I was working in Chicago, and I said, I tell you what, give me 150 of those coats and send a smattering out to the rest of the company. We sold through those inside of a week and a half. We were down to 20 coats. Your dad, Paul Becker, on the other hand, I had been talking to Paul, and I'm like, does he have any in the stream ready for us to place another order? And Paul's like, well, I don't know. So I sat down with Freddie, and I'm like, it's the rope-a-dope coat, but we're ahead of it this time. And he's like, well, we can't get the coats made. And I'm like, well, Paul can get his hands on 200 and have them shipped in 3 days. And Freddie's looking at me like, how the hell did you do this? And I'm like, well, you taught me last time, be prepared. So we ended up with 500 of those coats, and we had over 95% sell-through in the season, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, I have some in storage in my vault here. Both of those coats.
Yeah, well, they worked in the 90s.
Well, now we're restyling them, so they still work. It's okay.
Now, it was a great advertising item. It showed up perfect, and it had a lot of flash for the price. And we could make money on them, though. That was the thing, because we were taking a coat that at net was costing us $1,600 and selling it for $4,000. Even with the load and everything.
You know something very interesting about Freddie too? I mean, we always looked at him as being that merchant, but I guess he shadowed Sam Field, because Freddie was also a great marketing guy and he associated how to make the bet, like what you just said, Brian, that was a great piece to, would show up in advertising, and we were a promotional fur company. So Freddie really and truly did think like that. And again, that contributed to the success.
What about, Michelle and I talked a couple weeks ago about how Freddie he had a very large temper, but it took an awful lot for it to come out. I never saw it. I mean, I only saw, the docile, gentle, And as I said, he always was more concerned about how my grandfather was than how I was anyways. So, but did any of you guys, aside from Michelle, ever see him lose it over anything?
I never saw him lose it. Not with me.
No.
Yeah, numerous times.
Okay,
I would always challenge him on items. And, it was a sensitive area. But the fact that what would really piss him off was when I would challenge him, I had the numbers sitting in front of me and ready to go. And I could list them off without having to look. And then he's like, "Are you bullshitting me?" And I'm like, "All right, let's pull the reports out." And then he pulls them out and he goes, "All right, now you really pissed me off." Because I was pretty accurate. But when he got mad like that, he didn't get, it was like a real brief short temper. And then you could tell he's thinking it through and he's looking at it and going, "All right, maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. Let's see what the truth is." And when I was wrong, I was wrong. And he called me on it, which was fair because it was a great working relationship. And I think because of that, I earned a lot of his trust. Not that he didn't check up on me, but he didn't necessarily, he left me a lot of free rein when I was running Class 8 in Chicago, which, meant that he respected me a lot. And I appreciated that, giving me the opportunity.
You know something?
Michelle?
Freddie had a
Go ahead.
Freddie had a
I got a
really
question for Michelle afterwards. Go ahead.
Sure.
Freddie had a really interesting position when you think about it. You talk about a man with patience, because we were all young kids. Everybody was fresh out of college. That came into that department.
You weren't from college. We came up through the ranks.
Well, no. I'm talking about the training program.
Oh, yes.
When the people came through, I mean, yeah, I didn't go to college. I went to 3. I never graduated. Did you graduate college, Jim?
No, you want to know something? I was thinking about this the other day. I've never been on a job interview in my life. I started working at 15 and a half at Evans. And then I worked for BC. I filled out an application. I went right to BC. It didn't have the interview. I just started working. It's crazy.
Do you think you would have gotten the job if you had to interview?
Where? In Evans?
Anyway, I'm kidding.
I worked for my father at 15 and a half. I mean, how much earlier can I work?
You want to know something? I guess I got to take, I'm not laughing because I have the same story. I went to work at Evans at 18. I left there and started my own business. At 32, I started my own business. So I never had a job interview, and I'm afraid I probably wouldn't have gotten hired.
Yeah, because we worked, when you start from the cleaning toilets and you go up and you're in merchandising, everybody thinks you're a big shot.
Well, I had said in a previous call, and I'm sure most of you don't know this, my dad never even graduated high school.
But that's okay.
So I'm sure that it never bothered him to know that whoever didn't go to college or, wherever.
He was certainly a valedictorian in life. And, all kidding aside, at the end of the day, Jimmy, you and I and Scott are of the generation that, we were between. You didn't have to go to college. You had to go to college. It's interesting how we succeeded there because Evans was really high on going to college because.
Yeah, but at a certain point, they needed people. They couldn't get the people. Kieschnick and Periga and Bev Tanner. The wheel that they were spinning could not go fast enough at a certain point. So I think they abandoned a lot of that and just they just had to find people. And if you had fur experience, then that became the most important thing.
Well, it was
as a kid.
It was a very he was very, very, I never knew that he didn't go to high school until he passed away. I mean, that he didn't graduate high school. It was a very sensitive area for him. My mom was telling me that she didn't remember which company. There was some fur company in Pennsylvania, she thinks, that was recruiting him. and he wouldn't even go for the interview because of such a lack of confidence over his lack of education. And she was telling me, she told me this the other day, she kept telling him, I'll help you study. You can get your GED. He didn't want anything to do with it. So that
Plus,
was,
he was
you know,
too
an
busy.
area where he just felt inferior because it was always a point of contention for him. It was a very sensitive area, which I'm sure is why, for us, we never were given the choice. We were told, you're going to college. If you go for a year and you really hate it, that's fine, but you're going. There was never a choice. And education was.
We went to college at Evans. We learned at
Right,
Evans. We went to the
That's right.
college of Evans, you know? And
So,
I
Michelle,
think that helped.
Michelle, that's a good bridge to what I was going to ask you, which is, so between schooling or the lack thereof, and then what your dad, everybody, I don't know if everybody knows about your dad witnessing growing up in a family bakery business and seeing a family business, and then the AL era and what he learned in the way. So, like, what's the combination and these things that sort of informed this personality that came out the other end, do you think?
I think a lot of the conservatism for him, because there were a lot of people that went through this and had parents that had been, in Europe and had seen the Holocaust and were, new immigrants and were conservative and afraid with their money. I think that because of the way my grandfather was and was very risk adverse and very conservative, and I think that's where that came from for him. He, like I said, had my grandfather done what a lot of people his age did that came to Arizona and invested in property and land, and we would have been so wealthy that none of us would have worked. I mean, but that's not how he was. And I think that my dad saw that a lot, and that made him the conservative guy that he was.
Okay, and then how much of it all, once he started working for AL and whatnot, of what became his quote unquote management style is in reaction to what he, like with David, what he underwent from AL?
Yeah, I'm sure that was a good part of it. And like AL was, my parents always told us he was very, very difficult in business, but outside of business, he was the most wonderful, generous human being. So he worked hard because that's what was expected. I mean, you saw that memo that I gave you, the copy of the memo that he wrote from the AL wrote from the hospital. I think that pretty much says it all about what his expectations were of his employees. And I am sure that part of that rubbed off on my dad, which is why, you guys were up at 2:00 in the morning working in the hotel room, because the expectation was it was your life.
Yeah. So I always learn one thing: either you do what they want you to do, or they'll find somebody else to do it for you. That's just the way it is. But that's how Evans was. You don't want to do it, we'll find somebody to do it for you.
Right.
And that's how we all came up through the ranks.
Well, and everybody worked hard, and I think most people were probably pretty well compensated.
I think
because
we're
they
all
can't drive
pretty
you
well
that hard.
compensated.
Yeah.
But I just always found it interesting how that Freddie's generation, Freddie, LaBelle, Barry Novak, the guys who, in their youth caught the end of AL's, the end of his whip, so to speak. How they all, I guess, and again, that's why I always ask how much of it was in reaction to what they experienced. None of them managed that way. They were all very different. So even if you talk about like your dad having a temper, he restrained it for as much as he could, or he had to.
Right.
And so then again, I would sit there if he were here and I would say, Freddie, how much of that is in reaction to not wanting to unleash the quote unquote AL?
Right.
Well, remember too, he was leading the pack. It was his game at that point. You know what I mean? So he's going to control the mood, the atmosphere for all of us the way that he saw fit. Which was, I mean, again, I don't think, Jimmy, Brian, do you ever remember complaining about being overworked?
No, I learned from my father. When he worked out in Yorktown, he was working 12-hour days, 5 days a week, because they had nobody else to, when they first opened it. Then they finally gave him somebody there. I learned that from him.
All right, wait. When you worked for your dad, did you complain about it?
No.
You didn't?
Complain to him? What, are you out of your mind?
Yeah. I probably would have been better off complaining to him than my dad when I had to work with him.
Yeah,
But-
I mean, there was
How
no
about you, Brian?
No, never. It was just, we got to get it done. And, there was one time, you're familiar with it, we had a sale out in Palm Springs, and we had a sale the following day at Beverly Hills. So I had to stuff this Camry. I had over 200 coats in a Camry. And I got back at 11:30 at night. Nothing's open. So we stole there was a shopping cart out in the street. I pulled into the garage. We're loading it into there. Jane's pushing it up to the apartment, then coming back down, and we're reloading it. You just did what you had to do. I mean, it's what it took. And, everybody kind of understood that. When it was off season, yeah, things were a lot more lax. But during season, if there was a chance to make money, you had to do it.
Yeah, and
And
when
you
we
wanted
used to go to Canada, we used to want to go to the clubs. We couldn't do that. We had to do the numbers. We had to have the numbers ready before breakfast.
When you're talking about the clubs, Jimmy, you're talking about like the social clubs, the billiards and like the reading rooms and such.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
all
what I
that.
thought. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, when we were kids, all of our friends used to go on vacation in the winter, in December, during winter break. Not us. We couldn't go then because it's the middle of the season. So we used to have to wait until the season. We would go during the service season because my dad wasn't so involved in the service season. So we would go, it was even after spring break. We would have to take all our school books with us, and because we couldn't go during the season. We never went during the season. And even so, I said on a previous podcast, every single day he would have to call in and see how did we do today? What were the numbers?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Well, it
revolved around
does run through your blood.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It really and truly does. And again, so we've all had our own businesses. It's the same thing. That's sort of what Evans did to us, is they made us feel by rewarding us, by giving us handsome salaries and trusting us and pushing us. They made us feel like we were a member of the team, part of the group. It was like our own. We had a piece of that business. So again, there's nothing
do you think it's because of where you worked? I mean, I think that there's also a change of times and a change of importance and a change of, at least with my dad, you guys are all a little bit younger than my dad would have been or was, but I think in that era, that time, it was so different than it is now. And so much of a man's identity was wrapped up in their career. And I think, that clearly has changed. It would be very hard to find people that would work the way you guys all did in your career.
Today they won't. No, not
today.
even a chance.
You just got to get him to show up today.
Yeah,
exactly. So I think it's a whole different ball game. There's all this talk about work-life balance and all that kind of stuff. And I know it from my own kids. I hear it from my kids. Well, that's great. I want to make a lot of money, but I also need work-life balance. And I always think back to my dad and my childhood growing up and think, wow, there was really I don't know where that term came from, because there was no such thing as that.
Whoa, look how far we have come.
I had been in Woodfield as a vault boy.
My father never told me. He just told me I was always stupid.
I originally started in LA.
It was 10 years that I spent there.
The thing is, this is not super complex.
You guys got to stop advertising 40 to 90% off. I have to tell you, you got to create allies. And I think we never figured out how to create allies in our industry.
Memorandum, January 30, 1970. The body is an old 1902 model. Sometimes the motor sputters with pain.
Being a leader, being the CEO, it's not an easy lifestyle. The grunt work, guys, is the final mile, though.
I might work with Denny Lane, work with Paul McCartney in Wings, very popular band.
I could tell you my interrogation with Frank Ricky.
Has been detrimental to the fashion industry, not just the fur business, but the fashion industry as a whole.
When you're doing a hotel sale, you got to take a lot of goods to fill up the room.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the difference between buying and merchandising. Everybody tell us what you took from your experiences, the Freddie, that you still, not just Evans, but from Freddie in particular, that you still use in your work life or even in your personal life today.
Well, when I went to work for BC, I went to the warehouse and I was working for a guy for a long time, a guy named Adam Seufer. And, we were working together. He was the boss and I was like, his assistant. And I never forget one of the black girls that worked for me says, "Why are you working so hard? Adam's not here." I said, "What about when Adam's not here and I'm in charge?" I said, "That's a big difference. You got to work. You can't just work when somebody's watching you. You got to work all the time because one day you could be in charge." And a couple of years later, Adam went to New York and I became in charge for 10 years of my time. And, you just take that, you work, you don't need somebody over your head beating you every day just to work. You got to work because that's for yourself, not for somebody else. And that's what I learned even at Evans, you had to get it done. I remember going to the warehouse one day and Larry was there, a whole bunch of people. A shipment came in and one of the guys says, I said, "We got to open this." "No, we don't have to open it. We can wait for tomorrow." I says, "No, I'm doing it now." And I did. We opened it right then and there. I opened it myself, started putting it on the hangers, and this is the way we were taught.
Right, Scott.
Yes, ma'am.
It's straight out of the memo from your grandfather.
Right.
You have right to look at yourself in the mirror. Don't do it for anybody else. Do it for yourself to be able to. And I don't know if you shared the memo with Jimmy and Brian, but my mom found a memo that was written in 1970, about 3 months, I think, before AL died. And he wasn't even active on a daily basis at that point. But
he might as well have been by what he wrote in the thing.
Exactly. But this memo was, it was a memo about specific things about the business. But at the end, it talked about how you have to, 110%, and you have to do that for yourself to be able to look in the mirror, to know that you gave everything you had. It was a whole, and obviously that got through to the employees and trickled its way down, even though he wasn't no longer alive. Because
I remember there was
look
a
at you
guy.
guys, and I hear what Jimmy is saying, and that's immediately what I thought about was that memo that he wrote.
Yeah, because I remember a guy came that was working for my father named Tony K. He was working for my father. He was like in the first salon, and AL came up to him and said, there's three kind of people in this world. Some that watch what happened, some wonder what happened, and some make things happen. And I want you to be the third one, make things happen. And this was in 1969 or 68
Right.
when he came to Yorktown. I mean, that's something that I've always said myself. You got to make things happen. Nobody's going to do it for you.
Right.
So, Jimmy, just to change topics for a second, what was it like when when AL came out to the store? Was there like fear of him coming out to the store? What was, what was the anticipation?
There was always fear when he came out to the stores. And I tell a story because Sharon Bass told me this. I never knew this, that when she used to come out to the store, and my father, because, all of these guys that worked for AL were just as tough as he was. And my father used to stand in front of the first line at Yorktown with his hands folded. And she used to walk, instead of walk straight, and then turn, she used to walk around the store so she wouldn't have to go in front of the first salon. Because she was afraid of something he would say to her, like, you're not doing this or you're not doing that. I'll never forget that. I didn't feel that way, but I remember they were going to send somebody out to Yorktown, and they said, we better not do that because Al's going to be too tough on him. He'll quit.
And even Freddie, in his nice, gentle way, as we've all said, was tough. And I think the important thing you said there was those guys were all mirrors of AL, the ones that passed through him. I mean, everybody complains about Riccio, but he learned it from my grandfather, who learned it from AL. So, that just it all went right back up to the source.
Well, you didn't want to disappoint anybody when you were working. That's one of the things that we learned. You didn't want to disappoint them, so they wouldn't have to get down on you all the time.
Well, this is very true, and that's I think what we sort of also felt from Freddie. Freddie was not intimidating in his management. He wasn't intimidating at all.
No, but he was insistent.
But no, you wanted to please him. You know what I mean? He gave you the information. He gave you the ball. He was the quarterback. And he would hand that ball off. Consider we were running backs. Jimmy also used to block for me. But, like you're a running back and you're running with that ball. He gave you the opportunity, to do that. He didn't say, you got to do this. He said, all right, do what you know how to do this. You know what I mean?
That's pretty much what Brian was describing in these situations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, we all worked for the man at, some at the same time. I think there was a point when we were all there at the same time. Wasn't there? Yes.
Yeah. Because I remember.
Wait, now that I have you here, what was that green shit that was on the hamburgers, Brian? Do you remember the hamburgers, Jimmy?
Yeah, with the green shit rolling down your arm.
What the heck was that?
Don't worry about it. That's what I tell Freddie. Don't worry about it. It tastes good.
Yeah.
All right, well, how about Freddie and food stories, since he clearly liked his food?
Freddie had a very delicate stomach.
Yes, he did.
So you knew that you were going to eat good, that you're going to be in a steakhouse, or you weren't going to be eating in a Thai restaurant, I can tell you that. We weren't going to be adventurous. But we would be, like in Korea, it would be Hugo's restaurant at the Hyatt. Not some Chinese place or some Korean thing, with dogs and cats. We were eating, I think it was monkey and some other shit, but that's a whole different story. Always good deli in New York.
Yep.
But your dad wouldn't eat like the pastrami or the corned beef. He'd get the turkey.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing?
Bland,
He always had a
bland,
stomach
bland,
ache.
bland.
No, but not. I tell you what, food was not the big thing for Fred.
What about the stories about being in meetings with Freddie and seeing him exert himself or his influence? However subtly, we all know that he did it. You know,
In a meeting, Freddie wasn't subtle. He wasn't subtle. Freddie was, like Brian pointed out, he would be pissed off when he was wrong. I don't ever remember him being wrong. You know what I mean? Freddie could lead a meeting, and because he commanded respect from everybody because he was proven. You know what I mean? Again, like you asked Jimmy what he took away from Freddie. I am the furthest thing from being conservative, but boy, when it came to my business, I learned that you got to check it, you got to check it again, you got to check it again, and then take 20% off. Yeah, you know what I mean? When you're comfortable, and then take 20% off. You know, it was again. I mean, we're all saying it. He directed us, and he directed the company. So in a meeting, like I say, there was never arguing. There was listening back and forth. And again, Freddie gave the opportunity for an open, an open field. Anybody have any suggestions? And
I
usually
remember.
Stuart would say, next time, could we get the corned beef instead of the, I mean, there was really not much of a really objection. Freddie gave the game plan and we moved on. And again, that was very much the way that I never worked with him, but reading his, he was like the greatest coach in the world. He was Vince Lombardi. There should be a trophy in business, the A.L. Meltzer instead of the Vince Lombardi for.
Yeah, they all wanted to jump across the table and choke Vince Lombardi too. So.
No, but I will tell you something. David also wrote some very motivating memos. Freddie wasn't as much a memo guy as he was a hands-on guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he wasn't. It was more. He was a hands-on guy, and he was more the numbers person. I mean, he was a numbers guy. He never, and that may have been because of the whole education thing. I don't know. A lack of confidence in his writing. I'm not sure. But yeah, he could lead a meeting. He could
what I think it was at work, Michelle? I think on the work thing, no matter what position all those old timers had, they all knew every part of the business. And so you were expected to know every part of the business, regardless of whether you were the buyer or the advertiser or the manager in a lease department.
Well, I could tell you, my husband was in the business for a while. And when he started in the training program, I don't know how long he spent out at Central inspecting coats, like forever. It just never was ending.
Well, but that's really where
part.
Everybody started.
Right, exactly. So that's how you learned every part of how you learned every part of the business.
Right.
You had to be around the product.
Well, back to the meetings. I got to see the aftermath of the meetings because when I was working with Freddie, and that is a term that I don't use loosely. I was working with him, not for him. Yeah, there's a big difference. There was a big difference. And usually I would get called in about an hour to 2 hours after the meeting. That way I would have time to summarize everything that was said and everything, how Freddie responded. And then we would almost go line item back and forth. Were we right? Were we wrong? And when I'm saying we, I'm referring to Freddie and I, because during the meetings, nobody would ever notice. But if my left hand rolled over, he was wrong. If my right hand rolled over, he was right when he was spouting numbers. So it was a kind of a check and balance system because he couldn't know everything. I mean, and this way we could communicate and he understood and nobody else at the table had a clue as what was happening. And then afterwards, we'd be able to sit down and then we would see where we were a little off, where we were right on track, and then use that information to fine tune the numbers as to where they really should be. There's a lot that Freddie did behind the scenes that he knew the numbers were not the most important, but if you didn't follow the numbers, all the other work just fell apart. You have to be able to give the people the support that they need. They have to have the coats that they need to sell. If you don't have the coats, you can't sell them. And he was excellent at that. And working with them that way, you watched his mind work, and he really tried to encompass everything people said, take it in, and then discard what was just, I'm not going to say nonsense, but what didn't pertain to what was generic to the discussion we were having. But I'm going to regress one little bit. Back to Michelle. When you were on vacation, you should have seen Jimmy Leitz and Mark Pasternak fight for the Freddie Handel phone call on Saturday. I think Larry can give you a real good description of that.
Well, the other thing to add to what you were saying about numbers and all that, the other thing that he was, at least, when I worked with him, and I'm sure it was the same way, the numbers can tell you a lot of things, but it can't tell you what customers ask for that you don't have. And so I know it was always important for him to reach out to people. And even when, he told me he would talk to even to the salespeople, because you have to find out, well, it's great to see what we are selling, but what are we missing? What are we not selling because we don't have it?
And that goes back to the juggle, and Jimmy said something about that earlier, and that was part of Freddie's big job, was because of our archaic buying system where we involved all the store managers, and by the time Bob LaBelle would give in his orders, it was 4, 5, 6 times what the open to buy was, and that's where Freddie and he and Barry pretty much between the three of them had to get it back down to where it was supposed to be.
Yes, I remember one time we had a coat that was like a mink, not a mink tail, but a mink pieces, a chevron mink pieces, and everybody fell in love with it. But they ordered the lease departments guys, just them alone. They ordered 5. They said, we want 500 for our stores. Freddie looked at them and said, you guys are out of your mind. I think we bought 100 for the whole company. I think maybe we sold them, but it was so many, 500. And we ended up, the guy couldn't make 500, and this is how that control all the time, no matter who it was the lease departments, or it was, the us, or in Chicago, or wherever it was, or Cosmos. He said, we can't spend that kind of money. We don't have it.
You want to know the one thing that, when you talk about the buying aspect of it, there was inclusion. And I think that I sort of disagree a little bit. Of course, there has to be somebody that, cleans up the order, so to speak. But I love the fact that Evans would bring in their lease department managers and be able to make them a part of the buying, because they're the ones that are in front of the customers.
Right.
And just like what you said, about, knowing, Freddie would know that he had to find out what they were asking for that you didn't have. Yeah, you know what I mean? So that gave you the opportunity to be out there and be getting information from these guys. And then again, making them feel that they are important. They can go back to their customer and say, I was in New York. And, and again, I know it because I was part of it. You know what I mean? We all were part of the lease departments too.
But you had to have control with the purse strings.
That's the most important.
And again, that's why I'm saying that's what the balancing act was, that by having this extra layer of allowing all these managers to be involved in the buying process, it just gave Freddie this other layer of management, something that had to be managed and, like I said, brought back down from way out here to, to, like Jimmy said, from 500 to 100.
Well, and again, I think a lot of it was Freddie trusted the people, until he couldn't trust you anymore, and then you were gone.
Everybody's talking about Freddie and the buying trips and that, and how you would have to pare things down. But one thing I don't think anyone ever realized was, once the buying trips were done and all the lease department's original requests came in, all that information got dumped on my desk. I had to total it, summarize what the lease departments thought was going to be the #1 style, the #1 item, and then rank them by how much and weight it by how much that each coat was given a number. If you were ordering 100, 200, 300, if all the stores did it, or if they was only 20% of the stores and they wanted that many, was it territorial? And then after the season, Freddie would sit down and we would go over those reports, and it would give us an indication of not who he should listen to, but how he should listen to them and get better feedback as to keep a broad spectrum of things available in the stores. A lot of people don't realize he did a lot of that in the background that, you know, it was reaffirming to what a lot of his gut said, but every so often he'd really get surprised.
It's all about, he was a forecaster too. You know, it's funny. We keep talking about, you know, how much merchandise we need to be able to sell. Freddie was always concerned, because Freddie was also something important that I thought about that Freddie taught me was be a man of your word, and relationship is the key in business, you know, because there were times that we needed friends. And, you know, there were times you heard Mike Lilakakis. There were many vendors that would come to Evans for help. Well, there were times that we needed to go to those vendors for help.
Right.
Yes.
And it was about maintaining a relationship and being that guy. You know, it was like, I remember he was, one time we were at Hong Kong Fur in Hong Kong. And Henry's son called me the abacus. And Freddie says to me, "What does that mean?" And Henry goes, "He could be counted on." And it was like, that is exactly what Freddie Handel taught me, was, you know, to be a man of your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. You may want to bite your lip the whole way through, but do it. You said you were going to do it. And that's why we never complained, because we were there to do it. And you know, again, he sent us off with life's lessons, really and truly.
He taught me the same thing about relationships. I mean, when we bought the business in the first 6 months, I mean, we ran into a problem with money, you know, not being able to pay for some orders, and some orders on time. And he would just picked up the phone and he called Nick Georges and he said, "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Money's tough right now. Can I have an extra 30 days? And Nick was like, "Yeah, not a problem." And that's because you have a relationship. And even today, you know,
And you're
I
not
can call
bullshitting,
Nick on the
like the guy
phone.
said.
Oh, I can call Nick on the phone. I can call some of these people that he built relationships with that are still around. There's not a whole lot of them. I mean, I talked to Nick last year because I had a customer and I needed a favor. And when you build relationships and people can trust you, they're willing to do things for you, help you, you know?
Exactly.
And a lot of that came from my dad. I mean, he
Okay,
taught
so
me
Michelle-
how to
100%.
be upstanding and truthful, and there's still people in the market I can call and go to if I need a favor. And
So
part
along
of that
those
is
same lines,
because of what he taught.
Michelle, along those same lines, and then I'll go around the room and have everybody else same thing, and then we'll let everybody go. So you just did a deal and took Evans back over in Scottsdale. So
I'm in the
do you-
middle of doing. I'm
okay,
in the
so
middle of
in
doing
this,
it,
like
yes.
what of lessons of your dad are coming out as you're
Everything.
negotiating this deal?
Everything he ever taught me. I mean, you go into a deal and you don't put the numbers out first. You wait and listen and hear what they have to say before you show your hand. Okay. So, I mean, everything that I learned about business, I learned from him.
You know, it's interesting when you just use that term, show your hand. I think the one thing, none of us really had hobbies because we're always at work. The one thing I think that your dad loved to do more than anything was play cards. I think because it tested his mind. You know, it tested his mind. And if you think in math, cards is good.
Right.
But
Right.
but Freddie actually, what you just said, don't show your hand. Freddie was
Right.
he didn't have a poker face.
Right.
He did not. When he was playing cards, he always had that diverticulitis face.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's like I told you guys the story, and I don't. Jimmy and Brian weren't there when he got ready to leave the company. To really leave the company, they didn't want him to go, and they were negotiating this consulting contract with him. He went in with a very low number in his head because he knew that he was moving out here and he was going to only be going into the store every once in a while to supposedly consult. He had a number in his head, and he didn't say a word when he went into David's office, and he walked out, just couldn't get to the phone fast enough and just giggled into the phone when my mom answered because they gave him 3 times what he was planning on asking. So it was, those kinds of small things that I learned from him. When you're negotiating, you don't talk first, but there's so many things that he taught me that I couldn't even begin to even describe how much I learned from him about business in general.
Wow.
Definitely, and this is really directed towards Michelle. Working for Freddie was a great opportunity. It was a wonderful experience. He gave people a lot of different opportunities, as you've heard throughout this conversation. But the one thing that he really, really excelled at was herding cats. Because, as everybody has said, you have 30, 50 people. He was able to gather all that information and make really sound decisions on it. And being able to work with somebody like that taught everybody. And as the people who've known him, a lot of us have gone out on our own and have used what he taught us throughout our business lives.
Like I say, for me, I think the door was open, certainly for me, because my dad was there first.
Right.
But, when it comes down to it, I was upset at 20 years old. I was thinking, God damn it. I mean, I was being introduced to everybody. Oh, this is Paul Becker's son. This is Paul Becker's son. And I was like, hey, I have, I'm out of phone sales and I'm now the assistant manager at Merrillville. I'm going up the ladder. You know what I mean? And it's like, I really and truly, I hated it for the longest time to say, well, this is Paul Becker's son. Freddie never, ever introduced me as Paul Becker's son. He was one of my father's best friends.
Right.
At the end of the day, I told you, Scott, the tribute to my dad was when I started my own business. That was the name of the business, Paul Becker's son.
Right.
And you know what? And that wraps it up in a nice ball about what Freddie and Paul and all these guys taught us, that, who you are and what you are and how you carry yourself about does matter and can either help you or harm you going forward.
100%.
Well, I agree.
It was more than just an education in the fur industry, just like this film. This is not about Evans. It's about family. It's about so many different things. It's about relations. We were guided, and Freddie, again, I worked closest with Freddie over the years. And he was, I'll use the term again, my mentor, sending me off, not only to Yorktown or Old Orchard, into the world, with knowledge that I used.
Well, I know that he would be really touched to know that all of you feel that way about him and are all successful, have been successful in your lives and your work lives. And to know, for me to know that he was part of that is really touching.
Wow, that was really fun. It's almost as much fun reliving it with you this way as it was doing it at the time. Like I said, I just sat back and let it happen because I just threw the topic on the table and everybody responded because we all had so much memory-wise and learning-wise, education-wise from this man, Fred Handel. So I'd like to thank you all for joining me today for this episode of the Companion Podcast in support of the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2. We will convene again very shortly and do this all over again. Until that time, I'm Scott. Have a great day.
On the next episode of the Companion Podcast in support of the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2.
And let me ask you a question. How can you never sit down? He told me, because the other one got his pants wrinkled.
Amazing. I didn't know what he did. I accused him of everything.
I had one woman, she sat there. She said, I'm coming in here and I'm going to blow your fucking brains out. This old lady, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to kill you and all your people with a gun. I'm going to blow your fucking brains out.
And she's trying to get this coat on and that, and George Caesar's struggling. He goes, here, can I help you? And she turns around, pulls out her gun and hands it to him, barrel side first, of course, and hands it to him. She says, here, can you hold this for me? It just can't fit with my coat on.
On the next episode of the Companion Podcast in support of the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2.